Lucas Marshall, a wealthy and overconfident man, accepted a bet that would reshape his life more drastically than he ever imagined. He had long been accustomed to triumph in both business and personal endeavors, fueled by his thirst for rivalry. However, when his close friend Jack put forth a bold dare at a lavish party in New York, Lucas felt his curiosity grow. Jack, smirking, raised his champagne glass and issued the challenge. "Let's see you conquer this, Lucas. I bet you wouldn't have the nerve to marry a woman who doesn't match your usual style." Renowned for pursuing beautiful women, Lucas was taken aback at first. Still, driven by his desire to prevail in all things, he raised an eyebrow. "And what's at stake?" he asked. With an amused grin, Jack answered, "$1 million to whoever wins. But you've got to marry her and stay married for a minimum of 6 months." Thrilled by both the competition and the financial motivation, Lucas didn't hesitate. He accepted before fully grasping the consequences. The woman Jack had in mind was Chloe Richards, someone who didn't conform to typical standards of physical beauty. Lucas had never met her, yet to him, it was just another agreement that needed to be won. Several days later, Lucas received more specific information about Chloe. She was independent, self-confident, and steadfast, completely unlike the women he typically spent time with. In truth, this only made him more intrigued. Lucas was used to taking control, so he was curious about how he would handle someone so unwilling to yield. Their first meeting transpired at an expensive restaurant. When Chloe arrived, Lucas instantly saw how different she was from anyone he had encountered. She wasn't impressed by the stylish surroundings, nor was she fazed by Lucas himself. Instead, she returned his gaze steadily, unshaken. "You must be Lucas Marshall," Chloe declared plainly as she took her seat. "And you must be Chloe Richards," he answered in a measured tone, extending his hand. She hesitated for a split second, then gave a decisive handshake, revealing her formidable willpower. "Let's not play games," Chloe began, her voice forthright. "I already know why we're here. I know all about the bet, the parameters, and the conditions." Slightly startled by her candor, Lucas managed not to show it, responding, "And you still chose to come?" He was keen to understand her reasoning. Pausing momentarily, Chloe said, "I have my motivations. I'm not naive, Lucas. 6 months may feel short, but plenty can happen during that time. If you assume you can manage or command me, you're miscalculating." Lucas gave a half-smile. Chloe was proving far more challenging than he'd presumed, and paradoxically, he found that captivating, maybe even a little admirable. After their initial meeting, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about her. She didn't fear him, which not only piqued his interest but also caused him to reassess his approach. He was a master strategist when it came to getting what he wanted, yet Chloe wasn't a typical opponent. She had her own tactics. Their second meeting took place at a modest cafe, entirely different from Lucas's preferred high-class hotspots. Chloe had suggested it, and Lucas, eager to learn more about her, had gone along with the plan. Lucas arrived to find Chloe already sipping tea, sporting a subtle smile. She greeted him warmly, devoid of the iciness she displayed before, but still exuding that steely composure. "I assumed you typically prefer 5-star establishments," Chloe remarked playfully as Lucas sat down. "Sometimes shaking up your routine can be refreshing," he replied, striving for an easygoing tone even though he felt somewhat displaced. They engaged in conversation, brushing the surface of personal details, but Chloe quickly got down to business. "If this is truly going forward, I want a few ground rules," she stated, placing her teacup on the table. "I'm not tempted by your money or your extravagant way of life. 6 months is 6 months, and when they're over, I plan on exiting with the same mindset I arrived with." Lucas studied her closely. He believed she was telling him the truth. Chloe was the type who charted her own course and had no desire for social advancement by marrying a multimillionaire. "So, what do you truly want, Chloe?" Lucas asked earnestly. "Freedom," she instantly responded. "I want you to realize that even though this is a formal arrangement, you can't stifle me. I've got my own life. It isn't going to revolve around you just because of a temporary marriage." Lucas grinned slightly. This wasn't what he had anticipated, but granting Chloe her independence didn't trouble him. As far as he was concerned, the marriage was purely a technicality en route to winning a bet. "All right," he said. 6 months. Then we each go our own way." Chloe paused, eyeing him carefully, likely probing if he truly meant it. She was resolute in her plan and determined not to allow Lucas even a glimmer of control. She was aware of his manipulative tendencies, but she trusted her inner strength enough to counter any attempts he might make. With that, the meeting concluded on better terms. Both parties exited with a clear sense of their roles. Chloe's objective was to keep her autonomy intact, while Lucas intended to treat the marriage as merely a procedure. Yet in the days leading up to the wedding, Lucas discovered the situation wasn't as straightforward as he presumed. His thoughts drifted to Chloe and her unwavering assurance. Perhaps, he speculated, this would be more complicated than he had predicted. Their wedding ceremony was a soulless event, taking place like a meticulously orchestrated agreement. Lucas, ever the strategist, considered himself the victor already. He believed the 6 months would race by, and Chloe, unyielding as she was, would inevitably give in to the luxury and opulence he planned to surround her with. Immediately following the ceremony, Lucas ushered Chloe to his expansive penthouse overlooking the heart of New York, a physical manifestation of his incredible wealth. Enormous glass windows captured the glittering cityscape, and the interior displayed the pinnacle of opulent design. To Lucas, this was the new battlefield, and material possessions would be his weapon of choice to bring Chloe to heel. But Chloe showed her true colors right away. Stepping into the penthouse, she wore an aloof expression, her gaze toward Lucas signifying not awe but defiance. 6 months, Lucas, and not 1 day more, she declared decisively, walking toward one of the windows, appearing disinterested in the sumptuous surroundings. Lucas smirked, confident in his routine. This sort of pushback was nothing new to him. He had repeatedly witnessed women fall for his suave charm and abundant wealth. Convinced Chloe would be no exception, he forged ahead with his usual tactics. However, even in the first several days of their marriage, his strategies seemed ineffective. Lucas showered Chloe with lavish gifts, fine jewelry, designer wardrobes, luxury getaways, convinced she'd soon embrace a new lifestyle. Yet she stayed indifferent, adhering to her understated, unpretentious habits. "I don't need all of this, Lucas," she would calmly say, irritating him further. He had never dealt with resistance of this magnitude. It gradually shifted from a bet to something personal. He wanted to break through her defenses at any cost, to reassert his dominance. Realizing his usual approach was failing, Lucas grew more forceful. He tried dissuading Chloe from work, insisting her time was better utilized filling her role as my wife or reminding her she no longer needed a salary. When she resisted, he subjected her to endless waits for scheduled appointments, manipulated her timetable, and maneuvered circumstances to limit her sense of control. Yet Chloe remained unmoved, like a sturdy wall thwarting every test. Rather than weaken, her fortitude only appeared to intensify. Their exchanges became volatile, with Lucas's desire to assert command clashing against Chloe's unwavering resolve. One particularly tense evening, he shifted his method, assuming an emotional tactic. I can't comprehend you, Lucas admitted, annoyance blending with raw curiosity. Any other woman would be overjoyed to be in this kind of affluent environment, but you behave like it's inconsequential. What are you after? Chloe, who had remained calm, lifted her gaze, her eyes glowing with an unexpected fire. What do I want? Respect, Lucas. I'm not a mere pawn for you to control, she replied, her voice resolute. You assume money can conquer everything, yet you're wrong. There's more to life than these trappings, and there's more to a person than you seem to understand. You might have all the luxurious trimmings, but inside you're empty. And you detest that I can see right through it. Her words struck Lucas like a blow. Though he refused to show it, he found himself inwardly shaken. No woman had ever challenged him in this way, unveiling the vulnerable side he strove to conceal. But instead of acknowledging defeat, Lucas decided to tighten his grip. He drew up plans to keep Chloe more isolated, aiming to demonstrate how reliant she was on him. He disrupted her professional connections, severed advantageous business ties, and strategically wrecked notable events she sought to organize. Nevertheless, Chloe's grit held strong. Each attempt to suppress her autonomy was matched by her resolve, which only drove Lucas to double down. Their marriage was morphing into a battleground where subtle yet potent attacks were exchanged over the slightest disputes. Chloe never wavered, armed with quick comebacks whenever Lucas attempted to demean or dominate her. At last, one evening, she turned the tables. You presume you're victorious, Lucas? Chloe said in an unnervingly steady voice. Well, I have my own plan, too. Just wait and see. Illusions of control are built on something you can't even imagine. Her assurance threw Lucas off balance. For the first time, he felt real apprehension. Was he misjudging her? Had she been maneuvering the scenario from the outset? Days accelerated under a palpable tension, every interaction between them tightening the emotional atmosphere. Lucas, obsessed with maintaining control, employed every scheme he knew, yet he found Chloe unbreakable. Each failure fed his frustration, pushing him beyond simple anger. There was no denying that she had managed to rattle him in a way he never believed possible. But behind all this animosity, Lucas observed a shift within himself. As time passed, his feelings for Chloe defied his own logic. He realized he had begun to respect her staunch self-possession, admire her intelligence, and surprisingly, develop genuine curiosity about her life. Little by little, the woman he had married for a wager had become far more than just a token to win. One sleepless night, Lucas sprawled alone in the spacious living area of his home. He gazed at the city skyline through expansive windows. New York's energy had previously reinforced his sense of strength, yet now he sensed only emptiness. What is happening to me? He murmured, disturbed by his racing thoughts. Chloe's refusal to conform had slowly stripped away the mask that he had so painstakingly fashioned for himself. Indeed, her unyielding attitude was provoking a different reaction in him, setting off feelings he had long repressed. "How is everything going with your wife?" asked Jack, the very friend whose challenge had started all of this, during an informal meal they shared. Jack observed his friend with undisguised intrigue. "You're behaving differently, Lucas. By now, you'd normally have seized control in any relationship." Lucas forced a small laugh, trying to brush it off, but he was acutely aware that Jack had noticed a genuine change in him. "Maybe it's just an unexpected situation," Lucas muttered, swallowing hard. His mind drifted to Chloe and the enigma she represented. After countless sleepless nights and repeated failures to break her spirit, he was worn out. The ambition to dominate her had converged with a desire to understand her. The kind of vulnerability he was feeling was something new, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. That evening, Lucas returned to the penthouse determined to put an end to the uncertainty. He walked in, noticing Chloe sitting on a sofa, engrossed in a book, apparently unaffected by his arrival. The hush between them accentuated the tension more than raised voices ever could. "We need to talk," Lucas finally declared, disturbing the quiet. Chloe, maintaining a calm poise, set aside her reading. "Yes, we do," she agreed, their gazes locking. For several moments, neither spoke, the situation thick with unspoken emotion. "This relationship started out as a joke, a challenge," Lucas began, voice subdued. "But I can't keep denying that something has changed. I don't even know what to think anymore. Everything's spiraling out of my control, and I never expected to feel so disoriented." Chloe watched him in silence, her expression reflective. "I'm not here to toy with you," she eventually replied, her tone steady but laden with meaning. "From the start, I chose to participate in this marriage for reasons you still don't comprehend. Your wealth and controlling tendencies have never impressed me. There's more going on here." Lucas felt a slight chill, reminiscent of alarm. Her statement implied there were undisclosed aspects he had overlooked. "Then help me understand," he insisted, inhaling deeply. "I'm sick of these manipulations, and I sense you're equally as weary. If there's something you're not revealing, I need to know." Chloe studied his face, gauging his sincerity. "Lucas, your entire worldview is built on power," she said. "You bulldoze anyone who crosses your path. Yet with me, you can't do that. Don't you see? This is your chance to learn that authority isn't everything." A wave of vulnerability overcame Lucas. He, who seldom displayed weaknesses, found himself oddly exposed. "What if I'm not as unfeeling as everyone imagines?" he asked in a low tone. "What if I can change?" Chloe maintained her impartial composure. "That's your choice," she said. "But remember, change isn't a fleeting promise. It's a process, and I'm not going to stand by, counting on words alone." They lingered for a while longer in that loaded hush, neither one entirely sure how to transition from one topic to the next. Ultimately, Chloe left, leaving him alone to struggle with his thoughts. Over the next few days, their interactions were constrained. Lucas sensed he was perched on the edge of a precipice, feeling that everything in his life was poised to shift, and not in a manner he could predict or manipulate. The uncertainty gnawed at him. He had to know what Chloe's real motive was, what secrets she might be keeping. Hiring private investigators and digging into her past, he sought answers, but all the data led nowhere. Chloe seemed to have deliberately closed off every path. Something about her aura suggested she was the one orchestrating events, not Lucas. This notion was maddening for a man who had lived convinced he was always in charge. Late one night, upon returning from a business function, Lucas saw Chloe standing on a balcony, watching New York's glowing skyline. She looked almost regal, an enigmatic presence who had flipped his life upside down. He decided it was time to push for the truth. He stepped out onto the balcony, feeling the brisk night breeze against his face. Chloe didn't turn to him right away, but he saw her shoulders tense slightly. "I can't keep living with these illusions," Lucas pronounced, his voice wavering between desperation and stubbornness. "You need to tell me the truth now." Chloe spun, and for a moment he glimpsed a strong emotion flicker across her features. Wrapping her arms around herself, she stared back, eyes reflecting something fervent and dark. "Fine," she finally acquiesced, as though concluding that the right moment had arrived. "You want to know who I truly am, Lucas?" A tremor of excitement ran through him, but also a fear of what might be uncovered. He nodded, ignoring the tightness in his chest. He had to hear it, no matter the impact. "You've always seen yourself as the puppet master," Chloe stated, stepping forward slowly. "But this time, you were the puppet. I deliberately allowed this bet to happen. I wanted you to pick me, to think you could win, because there's something you need to learn." Lucas swallowed hard. He remembered the initial challenge at the party and how quickly he'd stepped into Jack's game. Had Chloe orchestrated that too? "I'm not sure I follow," he admitted. Chloe, arms still crossed, cut him off. "My last name is Richards. Does it ring a bell?" She observed his face and concluded that he had no recollection. You never cared enough to remember all the people you crushed in business. Lucas raised a brow. I've been involved in countless deals, he said, uncertain. I can't recall them all by name. Hearing his response, Chloe's jaw clenched. Exactly, she spat, voice laced with disappointment. My father ran a modest company. Nothing ostentatious, but it was our livelihood. You swooped in and snuffed it out without blinking. He lost everything, including his will to keep living. Stunned, Lucas opened his mouth but said nothing. The revelation was like a punch to his gut. He had torn apart a family to widen his empire. And this wasn't just a scorned ex-employee, it was Chloe's father. She recounted the tragedy in hushed, poignant words. Her father, once an idealistic businessman, had ended his own life in the aftermath of losing everything. Chloe and her mother had spiraled into debt and desolation, while Lucas prospered, unaware of the repercussions of his actions. From that day, I vowed I'd make you understand, Chloe declared, eyes gleaming with unshed tears. I wanted you to experience even a fragment of the torment you inflicted. A rising wave of remorse overcame Lucas. He had shattered people's existences in pursuit of profit. But to confront it so directly from the vantage of someone personally impacted was earth-shattering. Chloe, he tried to articulate, but words eluded him. Don't speak, she warned, voice shaking with anger, sorrow, and perhaps relief at finally unmasking herself. This marriage, it was never about the money for me. It was a plan. My plan to make you feel helpless, to see you pinned down with no escape. And you fell for it, trusting your own vanity. Emotions thundered inside him. Humiliation, contrition, alarm. This was a twist he never foresaw. I had no clue, Lucas confessed shakily, grappling with the ramifications of her revelation. He recalled all the times he gloated over his dealings, never once considering the real human toll. Of course you didn't, Chloe replied, voice ice cold. You parade around with your wealth, championing your accomplishments, while families like mine are laid to waste. You deserve a taste of the anguish we endured. Lucas's head was spinning. He wanted to beg for forgiveness, but realized that might sound hollow. What he had snatched from Chloe, her father, her stability, was permanent, irreversible. I had no idea, he finally repeated, tears nearly burning in his eyes. Chloe took a steadying breath, face etched with pain. Good, she said, turning away. Now you know. Perhaps you can live with the weight of it. Our 6 months? Consider it your sentence. And trust me, I'm not done. That night, Lucas stared into the dark. He felt as if the entire foundation of his existence had collapsed. The guilt was crushing. When morning came, Chloe was gone, leaving him alone in the penthouse that had once epitomized his extravagant triumph. He realized then that his best attempts at controlling others were nothing compared to the devastation she had faced. He was racked with regret, unsure how he could ever hope to rectify such profound damage. His initial efforts to approach Chloe were met with ice-cold silence. She would walk past him as though he were invisible, and each occasion it felt like yet another knife in the heart. Lucas found her indifference agonizing, but he recognized he had no moral ground to demand her attention. He was, after all, the architect of her suffering. Meanwhile, Chloe's stoic exterior was unyielding. She conversed politely with the household staff, made personal calls, and seemingly carried on as though Lucas did not exist. Determined to prove he was no longer the ruthless man who once wrecked her father's firm, Lucas tried to show he had changed. He left heartfelt notes, apologized incessantly, and attempted to show genuine remorse. But Chloe was not interested in hearing any of it. She had reached her threshold with him, and mere words wouldn't heal the wound. Each time he tried to speak up, the weight of his guilt crushed him. He felt powerless, tasting his own medicine for the first time. At work, Lucas noticed subtle sabotage. Key meetings got rescheduled without prior notice. Projects he depended on began to collapse mysteriously. He suspected Chloe's subtle hand in these downfalls, though she never openly admitted anything. Slowly, the mighty empire Lucas had constructed showed signs of decay. He watched helplessly as once reliable associates questioned his judgment. He recognized Chloe's mark on all of it, a methodical unraveling of the life he had once controlled. When he came home late from yet another disastrous day at the office, Lucas found Chloe talking on the phone, quietly laughing. He heard enough snippets to confirm she was discussing him and his faltering ventures. Fury and regret collided in him. Once Chloe ended the call, Lucas faced her, frustration etched on his features. "You're tearing my world to pieces, aren't you?" he whispered, heartbreak mingled with anger. In response, Chloe stared at him, expression unchanging. "Just returning the favor," she said simply. "Don't worry, I won't bankrupt you overnight. That'd be too quick. I want you to endure everything you've forced on me. I want you to watch every fragment of your success disintegrate and know precisely whose fault it is." He had no defense. There was no argument left that wouldn't sound self-centered or absurd. And perhaps that was her intention, to expose him to the daily weight of feeling powerless, uncertain, and isolated. Lucas, once considered indomitable, was crumbling. His staff noticed the shift. He seemed perpetually lost, penitent, and torn. But beneath his remorse, something else took shape. In the midst of being punished, he realized his feelings for Chloe weren't purely guilt or even pity. Somewhere along the way, he had begun to care for her on a deeper level. He found himself wanting not just to make amends, but also to understand her resilience, her intelligence, and her silent strength. Of course, acknowledging that was painful, since she seemed more focused on enacting her vengeance than ever reconsidering him as a human being. One night, Chloe confronted him directly. "You destroyed something in me, Lucas," she stated. "Something I can never recover. And now I want you to live with the aftermath." The finality in her voice was chilling. Lucas realized that the odds of ever redeeming himself were minimal. Yet he wanted to keep trying, not because he hoped to dodge further pain, but because he recognized the magnitude of his wrongdoing. He felt compelled to transform, to fight for a second chance, though he wasn't sure Chloe would ever forgive him. In the following weeks, Lucas became a ghost of himself. He had frequent nightmares, replaying the day he sealed the deal that bankrupted Chloe's father. Each morning, he awoke drenched in sweat, grappling with an oppressive combination of shame and regret. Yet Chloe's presence in the penthouse, though filled with icy distance, was an odd comfort. Every time he saw her, he was reminded of the reason he needed to be better. During one particularly brutal argument at home, Lucas tried to explain himself. "I was blinded by ambition, Chloe. I never thought about the real people affected by my deals." She laughed, but it was a hollow, biting sound. "That's obvious," she countered. "And I'm not here to fix your conscience. I'm here to ensure you never forget." Nonetheless, as more time went by, tiny cracks started to appear in Chloe's seemingly indestructible armor. The endless tug-of-war was taking a toll on both of them. She could see that Lucas was genuinely tormented, not merely feigning repentance to escape her fury. A tension grew in the space between their anger and sorrow, an emerging empathy that neither expected. Lucas remained steadfast, refusing to back down. He believed wholeheartedly that he had it in him to change. Gradually, he began to listen to Chloe's perspective without offering excuses. He started questioning his entire life's work, the nature of his pursuit of power, and even the deeper reasons he'd chosen such a path. All the while, Chloe watched carefully, torn between her need for justice and the unexpected possibility that Lucas might be capable of genuine transformation. Eventually, a cold evening arrived when their unspoken truce began to take shape. The tension hung heavy, but the anger had cooled somewhat. They spoke without shouting, acknowledging each other's pain. Lucas confessed his regrets, not only about what he did to her father, but also about how he had lived his entire adult life. To his surprise, Chloe listened, maybe not with forgiveness, but with a curiosity that was different from her earlier contempt. The next morning, she didn't greet him with the same icy disregard. She didn't really greet him at all, but their silence felt less hostile. And for Lucas, that was enough to give him a glimmer of hope. Little by little, Lucas attempted to demonstrate his sincerity through actions. He stopped trying to bury Chloe in lavish extravagances. Instead, he did small tasks, like preparing coffee the exact way she liked it or tidying the common areas before she woke up. He made sure not to crowd her, letting her occupy her personal space in the penthouse. At work, despite continuing sabotage, he took a new approach. He announced philanthropic initiatives and reached out to some of the small businesses he had destroyed in the past, hoping to assist in their recovery. This was not a quick or easy process. Many people remained understandably skeptical, viewing his attempts with suspicion. But Lucas persevered, driven by remorse and the desire to be someone better. Chloe observed these changes from a distance. She noticed how Lucas spoke differently to the penthouse staff, greeting them politely, asking if they needed help, and even clearing the table after meals. Small gestures, yes, but starkly different from the controlling man who once seemed to believe the entire world revolved around him. On a brisk morning, Chloe sat on the balcony wrapped in a cozy sweater, gazing at the city. Lucas approached slowly, carrying a cup of tea. He set it next to her and remained standing a few paces away, giving her breathing room. She glanced at the tea, then at him. "Thank you," she murmured, not with warmth exactly, but not with coldness either. It was the first time in quite a while that she directly acknowledged one of his gestures. Encouraged by that small response, Lucas carefully took a seat on a nearby chair. "I know you don't owe me a conversation," he said gently. "But if you need to talk about anything, I'm here." Chloe didn't reply immediately, so he remained quietly by her side, feeling the crisp air fill the space between them. For once, the silence wasn't suffocating. A few days later, an unexpected event forced them into closer proximity. A leak in the kitchen's water line caused extensive damage to parts of the penthouse. Repair teams invaded their home, generating chaos and noise. Lucas, seeing Chloe visibly distressed by the workers rummaging through the place, took charge of coordinating them. "I'll handle it," he promised, guiding the staff away so she could maintain some calm. Grateful for the reprieve, Chloe nodded, thankful not to be overwhelmed. That evening, after the workers had packed up, the pair sat quietly in the living room. Boxes and scattered equipment remained, evidence of the disarray. Chloe, still somewhat guarded, let out a sigh. "Thank you for dealing with all that. I was losing my patience." Her tone wasn't exactly tender, but there was a subtle note of relief. "No problem," Lucas responded, trying to hide how much her small acknowledgement mattered to him. Bit by bit, trust began to inch back. Chloe remained cautious, yet every day her responses were slightly less severe. She allowed Lucas to be in her presence without the harsh looks or loaded silences. He never pushed his luck, never demanded answers, never complained. He simply kept doing what he could to show he was sincere about changing. Meanwhile, Lucas's business empire showed ongoing cracks. He stayed unwavering in his vow not to retaliate against whoever was disrupting his operations. He knew it was likely Chloe's doing, or at least she was linked to those who were orchestrating the sabotage. He absorbed the shocks while continuing with the philanthropic approaches he had begun. Instead of aggressively playing his usual game, he started collaborating with other organizations, attempting to build rather than demolish. Friends and colleagues were bewildered. "Lucas, what's going on?" one partner asked during a meeting where Lucas proposed a strategy that put social responsibility first. "Is this some new PR angle?" Lucas merely shook his head. "No, it's personal," he replied succinctly. He had come to realize that not everyone needed to be privy to his transformation. One afternoon, while Chloe was reviewing documents for a charity event she was organizing, Lucas mustered the courage to knock on her door, a plate of sandwiches in hand. When she allowed him in, he carefully placed the plate on a table. "You've been in here for hours," he remarked. "You should eat." She nodded, scanning the sandwiches. "I appreciate it," she said quietly. For a moment, the tension between them seemed to lessen. Their eyes met briefly, and Lucas glimpsed a flicker of sympathy. It was the first sign that perhaps she was beginning to lower her guard. Despite the slow improvements, Lucas still wrestled with guilt each night. He'd lie awake, recalling the pain he'd caused and all the people he had wronged. The remorse was immense, and even the gentle changes in his relationship with Chloe couldn't entirely quell it. He realized this burden was something he would always carry. Yet he also recognized that genuine remorse, paired with meaningful action, was possibly his only path to real redemption. Eventually, after another strenuous day, Chloe approached Lucas in the living room where he was surrounded by spreadsheets and proposals. He was trying to salvage parts of his empire ethically, although he knew it might be doomed. "You seem exhausted," she noted, her voice neither gentle nor harsh, but balanced. He raised his gaze and rubbed his eyes. "It's been a day, but it's fine. I'll manage." She lingered, as if weighing whether to say more, then decided to speak. "Can I help with anything?" Lucas blinked in surprise. It was the first time she'd offered assistance since revealing her true reasons for entering this marriage. "Sure," he said softly. "Any input or advice you have, I'd be grateful." Sitting on the couch, she started reviewing the documents he had. Though they didn't talk about personal matters, there was a glimmer of cooperation, a sense that maybe this wasn't just a one-sided journey anymore. The next week saw an unspoken rhythm developing between them. They were still cautious, still grappling with the reality of their history, but they found moments of genuine connection. While Chloe was far from forgiving Lucas completely, she began to see that his efforts extended beyond winning her favor or escaping his guilt. He was visibly attempting to repair the lives he had shattered. Stories of small businesses that he was helping to rebuild circulated. Some people dared to believe that Lucas Marshall, the man once infamous for destroying anything in his path, was trying to be a force for good. One particularly rainy evening, Chloe and Lucas ended up in the penthouse kitchen together, cooking a simple meal after the staff had gone home. It was a scene neither would have predicted just weeks before. The tension eased momentarily, allowing their guards to lower. As they worked side by side, the clatter of plates and utensils somehow felt companionable. A flash of lightning illuminated the city, and the low rumble of thunder reminded them both that, in the grand scheme, some things were out of their control. At that instant, the only thing they could govern was how they chose to interact with one another. "Salt?" Chloe asked, extending her hand toward Lucas. He gave her the salt shaker, a faint smile forming. "Thanks." A comfortable pause hovered. Finally, Chloe turned off the stove and sighed. "Lucas, I can't pretend the past doesn't matter. But lately, I've seen you working really hard to be different." Her tone was hesitant, as though uncertain how to articulate her shifting perceptions. Lucas nodded, heart pounding slightly. He recognized the significance of her admission. "I'll never be able to undo what I did," he whispered, recalling the devastation he had caused her and her father. "But I mean it when I say I'm trying to be someone new, not just for you, but for me too." They ate together, the storm raging outside. Wind rattled the windows, but within the confines of the penthouse, a softer atmosphere enveloped them. While they didn't exchange intimate words about feelings or the future, the silence carried a different quality. It was peaceful, more accepting. After finishing, Chloe collected the plates, but Lucas quickly intervened. "I've got it," he insisted. Normally, he would have left such chores to household staff. This time, he felt compelled to do it himself. Chloe led him, wandering into the living room, still deep in thought. As the downpour intensified, Lucas joined her on the couch. They sat in subdued quiet, staring at the rain-spattered windows. Eventually, Chloe broke the hush. "I found out something back when I first decided to marry you," she said, twisting her fingers in her lap. Lucas listened intently, uncertain what she was about to reveal. "I was so set on destroying you for what you did. I wanted you to suffer," she continued. "But through these months, I ended up seeing glimpses of your world. And I'm starting to think you might be a victim of it, too." Lucas frowned, not sure whether to speak. "What do you mean?" he finally asked. She took a breath, trying to find the right words. "You were raised to believe power is everything, that empathy is a weakness, and that everyone is disposable if they stand in your way. That mindset, I see it crumbling now, and I think it's been tied to you for a very long time. Maybe you never knew there was another way." For a moment, Lucas couldn't respond. No one had ever reframed his life so compassionately. It was as if Chloe, despite having every reason to hate him, recognized the forces that molded him into the ruthless mogul he'd become. "That doesn't excuse what I did," he said, swallowing hard. "But it might explain why it was so easy for me to be heartless." Chloe nodded. "Yes, it explains, but it doesn't erase. Still, it helps me see you differently." A flash of lightning lit up the skyline, and they lapsed into another pause, though this time it wasn't filled with animosity. Lucas inched closer, not touching her, but letting the nearness convey what words couldn't. He wanted her to see that he was all in, that he wouldn't give up. Over the subsequent days, the weather cleared, yet within the penthouse, a cautious warmth grew. Chloe gradually let her guard slip, testing whether Lucas's development was genuine. Sometimes they prepared meals together. Other times they went over charity documents side by side. Occasionally, they just sat in silence, each quietly absorbed in their own thoughts. Lucas had not anticipated forging any sincere bond with this woman, given their harsh beginnings, yet he found himself wanting to be around her, to talk with her, to comfort her. Still, neither of them spoke about the looming 6-month deadline. Their arrangement was originally meant to last that long. Time, however, was ticking, and with each passing day, Lucas became more certain he didn't want this marriage to end when the bet officially concluded. Yet he was all too aware that, if he pushed too fast, he risked undoing the delicate progress they'd made. Finally, as the 6th month approached, Lucas sensed a growing anxiety. He wasn't sure if Chloe felt the same anticipation, but her guarded expression suggested she was aware of the clock. One evening, he found her reading quietly in the living room. Summoning courage, he walked over and settled on a chair a short distance away. "Our 6 months will soon be up," he said softly. Chloe set her book down, exhaling a slow breath. "Yes, I know." He ran a hand through his hair, wishing he had the perfect words. "I'm not the same person who made that arrogant bet," he continued. "And I understand if you want to leave once it's done. But I'd be lying if I said I wanted you to go." Chloe held his gaze, her emotions indecipherable. After several seconds, she spoke. "Lucas, I still feel so much pain about my father. The memory of what you did doesn't vanish just because you've changed." But she hesitated, eyes flickering with something akin to empathy. "I've seen you make choices that defy the man you once were. And despite everything, I've come to care for the person you're becoming." A wave of relief and gratitude washed over him. He hadn't fully expected those words. They were miles away from full forgiveness or a fresh start, but the fact that she cared was profound. "Chloe, if you give me a chance, I promise I'll keep working to make amends," he said, voice shaking slightly. She nodded, lips pressed together. "I'm willing to see where this goes, but I'm not guaranteeing anything." trust won't grow overnight. That tentative agreement was all Lucas needed to keep going. In the days that followed, he set aside his controlling tendencies and handed over more autonomy to those around him. He listened earnestly to staff, rectified issues at work without attempting to crush or exploit, and continued investing in philanthropic efforts. With each positive step, Chloe seemed more willing to allow him into her world, though she remained careful. One day, she invited him to attend an event she was hosting for a charity supporting families who had lost businesses through corporate takeovers, exactly the kind of suffering she herself had endured. At the event, Lucas volunteered discreetly, avoiding spotlight or recognition. He helped set up booths, carried supplies, and spoke kindly to participants. While he was there, he met several individuals whose lives had been torn apart much like Chloe's father's. Their stories impacted him more than he could say. He offered heartfelt apologies and asked how he might provide concrete assistance. Word started to spread among these communities, and some responded with appreciation for his sincerity. Observing this, Chloe was struck by genuine emotion. She watched Lucas hold conversations with strangers, not from a place of superiority, but from a place of compassion. It was unlike the man she had first encountered, cold, self-centered, oblivious to others' pain. Later that evening, she found him in a quiet corner of the venue, helping a child locate his missing mother. The tenderness in his eyes was palpable. In that moment, Chloe could not deny that he was indeed changing. After the successful event, they returned to the penthouse, both feeling the weight of the day's experiences. "You did good today," Chloe said, not mincing words. Lucas appreciated the candid acknowledgement. "I just wish I'd done these things sooner," he answered. "Maybe I could have saved your father and so many others from the misery I caused." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting sorrow. "You can't change the past, Lucas, but at least you're trying to prevent more damage now." Their gazes met, and an unspoken connection sparked between them, an understanding that, despite the irreparable harm done, there might be a path forward. With the final days of the 6-month arrangement dwindling, Lucas found himself fervently hoping she wouldn't walk away the moment the agreement was up. On the eve of the 6-month mark, Lucas went to great lengths planning a simple but meaningful dinner at home. He purposely avoided any extravagant displays, opting for a meal they could share in an intimate setting. Throughout the day, he felt a combination of excitement and dread. Would Chloe see this gesture as a pushy attempt to keep her from leaving, or would she understand his sincerity? When Chloe entered the dining area, the ambient light illuminated a table set with just a few candles, offering a subdued warmth. She paused, scanning the modest setup, a far cry from the lavish dinners he used to orchestrate in hopes of dazzling her. "Thank you for doing this," she said softly, taking a seat. Lucas smiled, exhaling in relief at her response. "I didn't want to overdo it," he explained, pouring them both water. "I just wanted a quiet moment with you." They began eating, the conversation initially touching on inconsequential topics. Eventually, Lucas inhaled shakily, deciding to bring up the elephant in the room. "Tomorrow is the end of our contract," he said, searching her expression. Her spoon halted for a moment. "I know." Nervousness flickered through him. "No matter what you decide, I want you to know I'm grateful for what this experience has taught me. I never thought I'd say that about what started as a bet, but here we are. You've shown me who I was and who I might become." Chloe's posture softened somewhat. "It's complicated," she answered, voice tinged with emotion. "A part of me wants to walk away, to bury the past and everything it cost me. But another part," she set her spoon down, folding her hands in her lap, "another part has seen someone worth knowing, maybe even worth trusting." Lucas's heartbeat surged. That slight, fragile hope was everything to him. "I'm not perfect," he said, sincerity enveloping his words. "I'll spend the rest of my life making amends if you let me." But if you need more time or space, I'll respect that too. Their eyes locked, and the moment seemed to stretch. Then, slowly, Chloe nodded. I'm not ready to walk away, she confessed, her voice barely audible. Relief overwhelmed him, and he resisted the urge to leap from his chair. Instead, he reached across the table, hesitantly offering his hand. She placed hers atop his, giving a faint but noticeable squeeze. That night, they sat up for hours, talking about everything and nothing, their childhood memories, their ambitions, the sorrows that shaped them, and the small joys that kept them going. It felt like a new chapter was unfolding, free from the constraints of the original bet. Even though the ghosts of the past remained, they were finally seeing each other clearly. The next morning, the official end of their contractual marriage arrived. Yet, rather than sever ties, they silently agreed to continue as partners exploring something genuine. Chloe didn't pack her bags. Lucas didn't bring up anything about divorce. They simply carried on, uncertain of what the future would hold, but resolved to see it through. A few more weeks elapsed, and with each day, the closeness grew. Yet beneath it all lingered the truth of what Lucas had once done, and Chloe's complicated emotional response to it. She might have decided not to leave, but that didn't mean old wounds had vanished. At times, she'd withdraw if certain triggers reminded her of the painful events that claimed her father's life. Lucas, in these instances, didn't push. He respected her need for distance. One afternoon, Chloe reported feeling consistently unwell, fatigued, and queasy in the mornings. Concerned, Lucas offered to take her to a doctor. Though she initially brushed it off as stress, the symptoms persisted. Eventually, she relented, and they visited a clinic together. The result was unexpected. Chloe was pregnant. Shaken by the news, Chloe looked at Lucas with fear and wonder in her gaze. Their entire arrangement had been forged under false pretenses. Now there was an innocent life at stake. A mixture of emotions surfaced: elation, uncertainty, and even trepidation. Lucas was beside himself, overwhelmed by happiness yet also painfully conscious of their fractured past. That evening, they sat in the living room, silent, the reality of a child bridging the emotional space between them. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked gently. Chloe swallowed, eyes brimming with complex feelings. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "This changes everything." "Lucas, everything." He placed a comforting hand over hers. "I know, and I want to be here fully for you and this child. Whatever you need, I mean it." Tears fell down Chloe's cheeks. Memories of her father, the heartbreak she'd endured, and her original plans of retribution flooded her thoughts. But here she was, married, albeit under strange circumstances, to a man who had played a huge role in her suffering, carrying his child. It felt surreal, almost impossible to reconcile. And yet, seeing Lucas so earnest, so transformed, made her wonder if this child might symbolize the start of a new narrative, not just for them, but for the fractured pieces of her life. Pregnancy ushered in a fresh phase of their relationship. Lucas started accompanying Chloe to prenatal visits, determined to support her through each step. He read every article and book he could find about expectant parents, occasionally overwhelming her with details about nutrition or sleep. While Chloe did find his eagerness overbearing at times, she recognized the sincerity fueling it. Beneath his awkwardness was a genuine desire to protect and provide. "You don't have to go to every appointment," Chloe mentioned one morning. "I know how hectic your work can get." Yet Lucas shook his head, resolute. "I want to. Besides, I've scaled back a lot of my business dealings." Indeed, he had passed many high-pressure responsibilities to subordinates he trusted, preferring to dedicate more time to personal matters. He still kept up with his philanthropic plans, offering assistance to those he had once harmed, but his once obsessive approach to profit and expansion had subsided. A new purpose anchored him now. Meanwhile, Chloe wrestled with her own internal battles. Some days she'd wake up feeling happy, thinking about how life had steered her and Lucas from enmity to partnership. Other days, she was consumed by anger and sadness, recalling the father she lost and the darkness of those initial weeks living with Lucas. She questioned her decisions, wondering if staying had made her disloyal to her father's memory. Yet whenever she caught sight of Lucas tenderly holding her ultrasound photos or noticed him quietly comforting a former competitor he was aiding, she saw a sincerity that was hard to dispute. Their daily routine evolved. In the mornings, Lucas brewed a special herbal tea recommended by the doctor, ensuring Chloe's morning sickness remained manageable. He made sure she always had healthy snacks and insisted on driving her anywhere she needed, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable. The simple day-to-day tasks replaced the grandeur and showiness he once used to control her. Now his gestures were born from love, and Chloe's guarded heart began to soften further. Occasionally, they revisited painful topics. "I'd like to visit my father's grave with you," Chloe said one evening, her voice trembling slightly. Lucas took her hand, solemn. "I'd be honored to go," he answered, feeling the gravity of such a step. A few days later, they made the drive to the cemetery. Standing beside Chloe as she placed fresh flowers on her father's tombstone, Lucas fought the profound sense of guilt that arose. He quietly apologized, tears in his eyes, admitting that he wished he could go back in time and undo the devastation he had caused. Chloe, tears tracing her cheeks, gripped his hand. She realized then that acceptance was forming in her heart. Maybe full forgiveness would come later, or maybe it would never fully arrive. Yet acceptance of what occurred, of what Lucas had become, was there. It was enough for her to release some of the anger she had carried for so long. Returning home from that emotionally charged visit, they shared minimal words but a deeper bond. Days slipped into weeks, and the pregnancy progressed. Chloe's belly grew rounder, each milestone validating the shift taking shape between them. Despite lingering conflict, especially concerning Lucas's role in destroying her father's business, Chloe saw the tangible commitment he made to rebuilding lives and relationships. She found her cynicism weakening. One crisp afternoon, while Chloe was organizing paperwork for a charitable project, she stumbled upon old pictures of her father with beaming smiles. The emotional blow was still sharp, and she started to cry softly. Lucas, noticing from a hallway, stepped in and quietly held her. No words were needed, his presence was enough. She let the tears roll, and he stayed, reflecting on the fact that this was no longer about controlling or salvaging a bet. It was about being an anchor for her in her most vulnerable moments. As Chloe neared the second trimester, the baby's health remained stable, and the doctor's reports were promising. They learned they were expecting a little girl. Lucas nearly burst with excitement, imagining a future where he would hold his daughter's hand, guiding her through life with the lessons he had learned, chief among them compassion over greed. During a casual dinner at home, after the ultrasound appointment, Lucas leaned across the table, a tender look in his eyes. "I've been thinking about something," he started, voice trembling with emotion. "We married because of that ridiculous bet. I like to do it again, properly this time. No conditions, no illusions. Just you and me." Chloe's breath caught, tears welling up. She remembered that loveless ceremony, cold transaction. Now, sitting across from a man who had humbled himself and done his best to transform, she felt a rush of gratitude and longing. Yet she also felt the weight of her past. "Lucas, that means a lot to me," she responded, her voice unsteady. "But are you sure we're ready?" He nodded, unwavering. "I'm certain about you, about us, and about our child. I know the past will never vanish, but I want to build a better life for our future." She reached for his hand. "I want that too," she whispered, feeling hope surging through her. "But let's take it slow. We have time, and we should make sure we're both truly at peace with where we've come from." He agreed without hesitation, understanding the significance of moving forward in a healthy, mindful way. The next phase saw them collaborating on philanthropic initiatives. With Chloe's guidance, Lucas created a program offering low-interest loans to small businesses at risk of being overrun by larger competitors. This was his way of rectifying some of the damage he once boasted about causing. Despite the skepticism they encountered from various corners, the program gained traction. Media outlets highlighted the shift in Lucas's approach, and while some labeled it a PR move, many who benefited directly described his genuine commitment. At home, baby preparations soon overtook their schedules. Chloe flipped through catalogs for cribs, strollers, and baby monitors. Lucas, initially overwhelmed by choices, embraced his research-driven side. Their interactions were gentle, supported by the knowledge of what they had been through and what they had to look forward to. One evening, however, an old trauma stirred Chloe awake from a nightmare. She dreamed of the day her father had broken down upon losing everything, his despair mirrored in her memory. Shaken, she found Lucas in the adjacent room, reviewing financial ledgers. "I can't stop seeing his face," she confided, voice trembling. Lucas hastily set aside his paperwork and guided her to the couch, wrapping an arm around her. "Talk to me," he gently urged, heart aching at her vulnerability. She described the nightmare in halting phrases. Through tears, she explained the shame she occasionally felt for still being with Lucas, carrying his child. Lucas listened intently, pained by the reminder of how profoundly his actions had altered her life. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, brushing a tear off her cheek. "You have every right to feel this way. I know I can't erase what's happened. But if you'll let me, I'll stay by your side while you confront it every step of the way." Chloe nodded, her breathing stabilizing as she leaned against him. In that moment, she understood that trusting Lucas was a choice she had to make repeatedly. It wasn't a single magical fix. It was an ongoing commitment to see him as he was now, not as the ghost of her father's downfall. A part of her would always grieve, yet she also recognized the possibility of letting new joy take root. Their relationship continued to deepen. Instead of cunning manipulation, they communicated honestly. Instead of fear or anger, they reached for mutual respect. Gradually, the weight of their past grew more manageable, even if it never fully disappeared. Chloe began to trust that Lucas's newfound compassion was authentic, while he remained steadfast in proving that he was no longer the tyrant who once lorded his power over everyone. Approaching her third trimester, Chloe found daily tasks increasingly difficult. Lucas became especially attentive, driving her to doctor's visits and ensuring she stayed active without overexerting herself. He also surprised her by creating a small meditation corner in the penthouse, a tranquil spot for her to relax amid the city's bustle. The warm lighting and plush pillows offered Chloe a serene space to breathe, reflect, and gently work through lingering grief. Amidst all these changes, they revisited the idea of renewing their wedding vows, this time for love and partnership, not a shallow bet. Eventually, they agreed on a quiet gathering in the penthouse itself, with only a handful of close friends and supporters. Jack, ironically the one who triggered the original dare, was among the guests, watching with astonishment at how things had unfolded. On the day of the vow renewal, Chloe wore a simple, elegant dress that accommodated her growing belly. Lucas, dressed in a tailored suit, couldn't take his eyes off her. As they stood together in the penthouse's main room, sunlight streaming through the massive windows, they exchanged their promises in earnest. Friends witnessed tears of joy from both bride and groom, aware of the complicated path that brought them to this moment. "I used to believe power meant domination," Lucas said solemnly, gazing at Chloe. "But now I know true strength lies in loving, in being accountable, and in giving without calculating what you'll gain in return. You helped me see that." I vow to keep growing, to keep learning, and to guard your heart for as long as you'll have me." Chloe's eyes glistened. "I once thought vengeance would fill the emptiness," she confessed. "But somehow you showed me that new possibilities can emerge from devastation. I promise to meet you in honesty, to face our fears, and to walk with you through every chapter of our story." They sealed those words with a kiss, quiet applause and gentle smiles echoing in the space. The penthouse that once felt cold and clinical now pulsed with warmth and genuine support. As the months rolled on, Lucas and Chloe prepared to welcome their child, anchored by commitment built on genuine transformation and a hope that love could transcend even the deepest wounds. Finally, the day arrived. Chloe went into labor, and Lucas was by her side in the hospital, holding her hand through each contraction. Hours later, a piercing cry announced the arrival of their daughter. As Lucas cradled the tiny infant, tears streamed and checked down his cheeks. He looked at Chloe, exhausted but radiating relief and awe, and he silently thanked whatever fate had brought them together, even under such fraught conditions. In the ensuing days, the penthouse was filled with the soft murmurs of an infant, late-night feedings, and the gentle chaos only a newborn can bring. Through bleary-eyed fatigue, Lucas and Chloe fell into an unspoken rhythm, supporting each other with every diaper change and every lullaby. For them, this child embodied a fresh beginning, a testament that out of pain, something beautiful could still blossom. Was Chloe's decision to forgive and ultimately marry Lucas again the correct one? Only time, experience, and each individual's moral compass could decide. Yet for her and Lucas, it felt undeniably right. They had walked a road of hate, regret, retribution, and eventual reconciliation. Their story, which started with a careless bet, had evolved into a profound journey of redemption and compassion. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Did Chloe do the right thing by granting Lucas another chance and building a future with him? Share your viewpoint in the comments below. Your engagement means a great deal. If this narrative moved you, consider subscribing for more stories just like this. Thank you for accompanying us on this heartfelt journey.